GM, good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road Show, the daily crypto show that's more reliable than a Fed rate hike announcement. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton, and today we're joined by Lark Davis, one of the leading crypto investors with millions of followers. Today, we will be discussing Pavel Durov, CEO of Telegram, one of the largest messaging apps in the world. Over 1 billion users, was arrested in France on Saturday. What happened? And why is this story such a big deal for crypto? And our takeaways from Jerome Powell's speech on Friday. Rate cuts are coming, everybody, but there's some interesting stuff that we need to pay attention to in the US economy over the next few weeks. Before we jump in, over 50% of you are not subscribed to our channel, and we really would appreciate it if you would subscribe. Not only is it the best thing for you to stay up to date on your crypto investments, but it also helps us grow. So in order to celebrate that, we're giving away free stuff. Check out the link in the show notes or the details in the show notes down below and subscribe now before the end of the month, and you could win. Before we start today's episode, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors over at Kelp DAO. Let's hear from them for just a moment. Get ready, because your reward farming game is about to level up. Introducing Gain, powered by Kelp, your degen concierge. Gain is an automated vault launched by Kelp that maximizes rewards for ETH users. It offers one-click access to airdrops and points from leading L2s like Linea, Scroll, Karak, and more. Here's how it works. Head over to milkroad.com/kelpgain and spot airdrop gain. Get a complete overview of how your assets are deployed and the rewards and points you stand to gain. With just a few clicks, deposit ETH or SETH or liquid staking tokens into the smart vault. That's it. The best part, once you deposit, you're issued a liquid token, AgETH, enabling you to participate in DeFi on Pendle, Spectra, Lyra, Splice, and others. Gain is already live, and you can go check it out for yourself today. Just head over to milkroad.com/kelpgain and get started. All right, Lark, let's jump in and start off with the big news of the weekend, which the whole world seems to be talking about, which is Pavel Durov, founder and CEO of Telegram, was arrested. Can you give us a bit of background? What happened here?
So basically, Pavel flew into France, and the French authorities picked him up when he got into France. The charges are basically this, that Telegram has been used for basically every bad thing under the sun. And basically, if you can imagine it as some kind of evil thing in the world, money laundering, something we would probably say without getting your video demonetized, and then all the rest of the bad stuff, right? So that's a very problematic situation, because essentially what France is saying is that you have allowed this stuff to go on your platform. You haven't been censoring people's chats, right? You haven't been censoring Telegram groups, and we want you to do that. And because you haven't been doing that, we're going to charge you with, terrorism and all this other kind of stuff, because you've enabled that to happen, which is a ludicrous and crazy argument. It's like, okay, so now we're going to charge Toyota, right? When somebody robs a bank, right? It's crazy stuff, right? But it feeds into the wider narrative of this attack on free speech. And it makes you realize, if they're going after Pavel, right? The Rumble CEO, he's already said he's just left Europe, right? He announced that on Twitter that I'm out of Europe. I'm not going back. I can't stay here anymore. It's too dangerous for me. You really understand that people like Facebook, for example, they just go along to get along, man. They don't give a crap about any of this stuff. They'll just, yep, CIA, we'll censor that guy, we'll deplatform, whatever. Whereas Telegram has sort of been upholding the software thesis that software gives people tools, and those tools can be neutral.
Yeah, you've got to give a lot of respect to Telegram they've been hesitant to take VC money. They've grown as a private company, and they've stood up for free speech for a long time. I want to get into why this matters to crypto, because there's a bunch of reasons beyond just decentralization, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But just a couple more quick things to add. The French authorities can hold Pavel until the 28th, so until Wednesday without cause, basically. And then at that point, we will know whether there's legitimate charges here and he will be held longer or if he will be released. So that'll be a big date to watch, is Wednesday. And then also, if these charges, if he was found guilty, he would spend 20 years in prison. So this is serious charges that they have against him. Before we jump into our reactions, Lark, let me just bring up here a few reactions from others around the world. So Elon Musk jumped in and he said, hashtag free Pavel. Clearly, with what he has done with X and Twitter, Elon Musk wants freedom of speech, and he is taking a very similar path here. It makes you wonder, like, are they going to go after Elon next? And then also coming in was Vitalik, who said that this looks very bad and worrying for the future of software and comms freedom in Europe. And then finally, Robert F. Kennedy also said France just arrested Pavel, the encrypted and uncensored Telegram platform. The need to protect freedom of speech has never been more urgent. And then a few other things came in earlier today. First, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, came out and said that this is not a political move because Pavel is from Russia, and this has caused a lot of tension between Russia and France. And then, no surprise here, a bunch of cyber attacks by Russian hackers are now happening to multiple French websites. So the fallout of all of this is pretty far and wide right now. On your end, Lark, what has been your reaction?
It's absurd beyond belief, but it's not surprising. Europe has been used as a sort of test bed for pushing against freedom, essentially, right? They don't have the same kind of, in most countries, they don't have the same sort of strong constitutional guarantees that they do in the United States, for example. They're pushing there too, but I would not be surprised if this was a call from somebody at the Pentagon. Hey, this guy's coming in. We want him. So France, you pick him up in the same way they did with Julian Assange. Hey, you guys pick him up over there because we want him here. Right. So look, we'll find out if there's some insider baseball like that in the future. But what's very interesting, of course, is that, from a freedom of speech perspective, see, Pavel Durov, he actually started something called VKontakty, VK. This is basically the equivalent of Facebook, but for Russian-speaking countries, right? So it's very popular in Russia, Kazakhstan, etc., right? That kind of got bought out, let's say, by interests within Russia. And so Pavel left and went to Dubai after that, started Telegram and all that stuff. Telegram has even been under attack for quite a while within Russia because of these same reasons. But he spent a lot of money and time and effort to make sure that there were all kinds of ways that people in Russia could access Telegram, because he believed that people in Russia need to have that sort of freedom of messaging service. And it's, of course, funny that Russia was not the one to arrest and put him in prison, but it was the country whose literal motto is liberté, égalité, fraternité. The first word is liberté, right? Where's the liberty, France? Where's the liberty? I guess they're just getting their marching orders from the CIA these days. And it's got very dangerous implications for freedom of speech. And of course, the hypocrisy drives me crazy. It's a wild, wild situation that we see here happening with Pavel. And it really starts to bring up the key point here, which I know we can have all kinds of criticisms, all kinds of governments for a whole variety of reasons. And some of that's more triggering to people than others. But the fact of the matter is, we need the software that's currently being developed by decentralized systems, right? And that's, I think, an important takeaway here is that because there's a centralized point of failure, which is essentially Pavel, the app now, of course, there are implications for how everything's going to move forward.
Yeah, and then that's the point that is, you got to take a step back here for a second. And there's a great tweet that I'm going to share on the screen here from Julian, one of the founders of Unlock Protocol, and he says, Telegram, we keep control for ourselves and refuse to cooperate. Tornado, referring to Tornado Cash, we relinquish all control, so we cannot cooperate. If you think these are the same things, you still do not understand the point of crypto. Lark, can you explain this to us?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Tornado Cash is a mixer service. So basically, you can send in Ethereum, comes out the other end clean, let's say, or obfuscated, we should perhaps say. And it allows for privacy privacy is important, right? The government doesn't like you having privacy, which is the same reason the government hates Monero. Do you know that the NSA has an outstanding bounty for anybody who can crack Monero's privacy features? They hate it so much, they literally want somebody to go out there and crack it. But Monero has not been cracked. Okay. Tornado Cash, they actually arrested the developer in Europe. I think, was he in the Netherlands, perhaps?
In the Netherlands, yeah.
He was in the Netherlands. So they literally went and arrested this developer for daring to make software that gave people privacy. Now, their argument again was, well, but, you know, it's being used by bad people to do bad things. Like, but it's also being used by plenty of regular people to do regular things. And again, it's a slippery slope argument because, well, what is the number one choice globally for crime? The $100 US bill. Mm-hmm. That's what people love. Cash is totally untraceable, right? It can be used for all kinds of nefarious purposes. So there's been an attack on software, particularly in Europe, an attempt to really control and erase privacy from the industry. But those kind of laws have been going in Europe for a while. You know, in some European countries, you can't purchase things more than like, I think one of the lowest limits I saw was about 5,000 euros cash. So if you want to go buy a used car, it costs 6,000 euros. Technically, you're not allowed to do that because you're a criminal. Because where did you get money from? Right? It's a crazy situation. It's a crazy situation. Makes you realize again why we need this software to ensure we have the tools of freedom globally. You know, a lot of times you talk about, well, okay, we're going to use Bitcoin to get around capital controls in Nigeria because that must be such a dysfunctional country. Like, look at what's going on in the world. People in the West are starting to wake up to the fact that crypto is more than just something to go YOLO your money on and hope that you make a bunch more. And we love that factor too. We all love the meme coins. We all love making money, but there's a bigger picture here that makes this technology incredibly important. And even stuff like BlackRock coming in with their Bitcoin ETFs, as I said before, it's kind of, yay, great, they're going to pump our bags, but long term, they're not here for the revolution. They're not here to ensure your ability to have free speech, and money is speech, of course. And the more of that gets taken off and put into their hands, the worse it is for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the takeaway here is that if Telegram was a decentralized app, then there would be no concerns. They wouldn't be able to shut it down. But because it is centralized, they can impact it, by arresting the founder or by, I'm not sure which jurisdiction. Telegram's in Dubai, correct? I think that's his jurisdiction.
Pavel's based in Dubai. I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm not sure about the rest of the team or how they've sort of set up the
wherever their servers are, though. Yeah. You know, they could be subpoenaed and impacted, and then a billion people lose their way to communicate. And sure, maybe some of those. For sure, some of those are using it for nefarious purposes. The same way some people are using Toyota cars for nefarious purposes. But we can't control that. All we can do is allow people to use the software as they should use it. And this type of control is really scary when it starts to get into freedom of speech issues. There's two other impacts here, Lark, that I'd love to touch on. One is Toncoin. There's a direct impact on Toncoin, and I'm sure many of our listeners probably have some investments in Toncoin. So let's talk about that. And then second is Pavel also is not your typical founder and CEO. He's not your typical billionaire. He's a billionaire, but he does not buy yachts and do what most founders do. He keeps it all in Bitcoin. And let's talk about that in a minute as well. First, let's talk about the impact on Toncoin. Let me bring up the price chart here. And Lark, tell us what you're seeing.
Well, it's obvious, right? The fate of Toncoin is largely linked to the fate of Telegram, right? So if for some reason they actually manage to get Telegram down, which I'm not sure it's what they want to do. I think what they want to do is they want to have the back doors. And if that means putting Pavel in prison for 20 years and bribing the rest of the development team and forcing a sell-off of the company or something like that so that they can control it, that's the path they'll go down. I don't know if that, in that scenario, does the Telegram Open Network blockchain survive in any sort of meaningful way? Hard to say. And look, I'm not trying to spread FUD here. It's just we have to ask these real questions, right? The impact of Pavel behind this blockchain, very, very important. I know there's a lot of people working on it, a lot of developers and builders working on it, but it's also a blockchain that's very much in its infancy. right? You look at the total value log, the total number of dApps building over there and stuff like that. Very, very early stage for this. So it's definitely a setback this early on. I think it can definitely rebound, right? But there's a lot of now unanswered questions about what will be the long-term fate if Pavel does go to prison for 20 years. What happens with the rest of the team? What happens, like I said, with the servers for Telegram? If Telegram goes down, my goodness gracious. And this is a continuation, right? TikTok was first, right? Because people were saying things on TikTok that the man didn't like. Telegram now, Rumble, of course, same boat. They're having to, now the founder's fleeing because he's worried about getting arrested as well, which is a good cause, right? So where does the Telegram open network end up? I don't know. I wish I could have a good answer for everybody. But certainly its future becomes more in question if we see Telegram going in the wrong direction, or we see Telegram even being shut down, which I think is the most extreme scenario here. I don't think that's a highly likely situation, but it is definitely linked to the success of a more centralized platform, right? Whereas like Bitcoin's not going anywhere, right? Bitcoin's highly decentralized. There's no governing body behind it or anything like that. And so you're going to be fine from that situation. But the Telegram Open Network blockchain, we shall see. And it's interesting because in a way, it was one of the most bullish blockchains, I think, of this cycle, from the perspective that like, holy cow, Telegram's got 1 billion users and they're all going to come on to the blockchain and start doing stuff and start trading. And we've had Telegram bots and we've had Telegram mini games that have attracted in some cases, literally tens or even hundreds of millions of users. It's been wild to see this happen. Now, of course, the market takes a step back and tries to assess the risk. Well, where are we going from here? What happens moving forward, right? On Wednesday, is he going to be charged with more stuff and kept in prison for years and years and years before he even gets to see a day in court? We don't know. We're going to find this out. But my guess is that the future for the Telegram Open Network is going to be highly impacted by how all this stuff starts playing out, and it'll be impacted by news stories and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So look, if Pavel gets for some reason freed and let to leave France, which is not going to be the case, he'll be a flight risk, and they might not even let him out on bail because of that. So we'll see. Now, the second part, the Bitcoin part. Pavel's a Bitcoiner. It's interesting. He did this interview with Tucker Carlson talking about how, you know, he's got two things, a bunch of cash in bank account and a bunch of Bitcoin. He's been a Bitcoiner for a long time because he's a man who understands the ability for the powerful to shut you down. He probably didn't think it was going to happen in France, right? He would expect something like that to happen if he goes to Moscow. He probably didn't expect something like that to happen when he goes to Paris, right? Which, of course, is the part of the shocking value here. But he understood that if I want to keep my wealth somewhere where I'm actually in control of it, Bitcoin's really one of my only options. The rest of the crypto stuff, man, you can't really invest in that 10-year, 20-year, hold your wealth in it, right? That's not what billionaires choose to hold their wealth in. They're not holding their wealth in dog coins, right? They're holding their wealth in Bitcoin because he understands if I want to pay anybody anywhere, I can do that, right? If I want to take my wealth with me across borders, I can do that. No one's going to shut it down. As long as I can remember that 12-word password in my brain or have it written down somewhere it's going to be adequately safe, then I have my money, no matter what happens, no matter where I go. And of course, he's probably made a lot of money because he's been a Bitcoiner for a long time. So if he's been buying a few $1,000,000 or more worth of Bitcoin a year, suddenly he probably has hundreds of millions, you know, a few years later. So there's also that. But he is a Bitcoiner. He believes in, he is a Bitcoiner from the sense that not only does he own Bitcoin, but he believes in the mission of decentralized systems. He believes in the mission of Bitcoin. He believes in freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad to see the Bitcoin community rallying behind him as well. So it's encouraging to see. And I think even, you know, Justin's son, who always has to inject himself into basically any situation happening ever, anywhere, also came out and said, well, let's make a free Pavel DAO and contribute to his legal fees. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, an evolving story that we'll be keeping an eye on, and I'm sure there will be more coming in the coming days and weeks, and one that really has far and wide implications. So something to watch, not just for investments, but for freedom of speech, which is obviously something that I think all of our listeners will care about. Okay, I want to switch gears here. Let's go to some more good news, I would say, which is Jerome Powell spoke on Friday at the Jackson Hole Summit, which is sort of like a summer camp for suits, I guess, and for the Fed. And
summer camp for central bankers.
Yeah, that's right. They do work in August, some of them. Give us the lowdown, Lark. What did Jerome Powell touch on, and what were the big takeaways?
Yeah, so it really gives us the road forward on what we need to be watching right now. So the key things to understand, and we've been talking about this stuff for a while, but to reiterate, now Jerome Powell's saying it. So basically, CPI, inflation, it's not a concern anymore. Obviously, if inflation starts spiking back up, then it becomes a concern. And there's even the concern that interest rate cuts could spike inflation back up, especially if they cut too fast. So that's something to keep in mind. But Jerome basically said inflation's no longer a concern for the Fed. We're heading in the right direction. Everything's going to be fine there. He also said what we all need to watch now is the jobs data. Now, we had bad jobs data in August, which of course freaked the markets out. Part of that was due to inaccurate reporting due to this hurricane. But since then, we've also had a downward revision of the total job numbers, which, look, a lot of jobs are still created. It's fine. What you really need to focus on now is the unemployment rate. Is it going to keep going up as a percentage? Right? So that's what people are going to be really focusing on. That's what the markets are going to be focusing on. And in the same way that previously with inflation numbers, if you get bad numbers for the unemployment rate, expect markets to have a negative reaction to that because it makes it more likely that a US recession is going to come and that markets are going to tank. Okay, so that's what we need to watch out for right now. Jobs markets are the new data to watch out for. I think the next number released is September 5th or 6th. So watch out for when that happens. I'm sure we'll be talking about it here when it does, but that's the big number to watch right now. What's happening with the jobs data? What's happening with the unemployment numbers? Keeping an eye, of course, on GDP numbers and stuff like that, and a lot of other things, manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the Fed said it's all about jobs now, baby. So that's what we're watching. But he also said, we're watching the jobs data, but the time to cut rates has come. So we are now looking at a rate cut in September. The question becomes, is it a 25 or 50 basis point cut? I know some people in the market still think a 75 basis point cut is plausible, but I don't think that's very much the case. Even a 50 basis point cut at this point could be a bit dramatic for the market because to an extent, it would be the Fed admitting that we've lost control of the situation and that we now need to cut harder than we had anticipated. So a 25 basis point cut is not going to provide a lot of relief to people looking to buy houses, to companies looking to refinance, okay? It's not. It's simply not. But it's also going to show markets that the Fed still thinks, at least they think, they're in control of the situation. So we then need to see more rate cuts, and we could have, of course, a full 100 basis point cut, so 1% decrease to the interest rates by maybe the end of the year or by early next year in January or February. It could be down to from the current 5.25 to 5.5 down to 4.25 to 4.5, which is going to provide a lot of relief for markets. A 1% decrease, 100 basis points, is actually going to provide some relief here for the market. So that's where we need to start heading. And of course, then the next question becomes, are we going to have the recession or not? Is this the beginning of the end, right?
I mean, you asked the question. Now I'm going to have to ask the follow-up. Obviously, Jerome Powell spoke in a very promising way for other than the concerns around jobs data, but for the most part, feeling pretty good about where the U.S. economy is sitting and feeling like we're going to hopefully avoid a recession. Is that where you think we are?
Hopefully. Look, historically, you have to understand this. Rate cuts that happen during a recession are bearish, and they generally happen before we see even further declines in prices. So generally, when a rate cut happens, you already have recessionary forces in play, which I know some people are saying, but we're already in a recession. Well, you can say we already feel like we're in a recession, but we're not in a recession for a variety of reasons right now. There's a lot of conflicting data that says, yeah, things are really tough. Other data that says, actually, things are pretty okay. The consumer is still staying resilient enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, we slowed down, but we're still in positive territory mostly. But that can change real fast, right? So as long as you get rate cuts and there's no recession historically, and of course, history is no indication of how the future is going to act, but historically, when you get rate cuts outside of a recession, markets will actually pump. Now, I've seen some theories that are basically saying we're in 1998 right now. which 1998 we had rate cuts. They were not super significant, but we did have rate cuts, right? So rates came down 100 basis points, whatever, let's say. And then the Fed kind of stopped and basis points stayed around there for quite a while. And then, of course, for those who might remember their history or were around for then, I was pretty young. I was not caring about markets back then, but we had the dot-com boom, right? We had the dot-com boom in 99. So we had this moment for markets to go absolutely bonkers. And some people are saying, well, that's AI right now. AI is the dot-com boom. This is the AI boom. This is the AI bubble. We're going to have this blow-off top come in for the stock markets, blow-off top come in for the crypto markets, and then we're going to have our big reckoning and potentially the multi-year bear market that comes in after that, because at some point you have to pay the piper for all this stuff. Now, the only question really becomes, and this is the main point of contention between everybody sort of looking, okay, what about the U.S. recession? Look, a recession is going to come at some point. They always do. They're a normal part of the business cycle. The question is, when does the recession come and how bad is it going to be? That's the variables, right? And we don't have the answers to that, but as we continue to look at data, we try to make our best projections. So right now, doesn't look like the recession is coming soon. So should have bullish conditions going into Q4, as long as the jobs data doesn't start deteriorating really fast.
So some promising catalysts coming up in the next month, September, looking like it could be the start.
Fingers
Lark's
crossed.
got his fingers crossed. Touch wood. Lark, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody listening in would love to know which catalysts you're watching in the U.S. economy. You want to hear us talk more about rates? You want to hear us talk more about jobs? What do you think the rate cuts are going to be? If you have an opinion on that, it's always interesting to know what you guys think. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you're not subscribed to this channel, make sure you subscribe, because you could win free stuff. We're giving away thousands of dollars in prizes right now. All you have to do is subscribe by the end of the month. Remember, none of this is financial advice. Investing in crypto is risky, and you should only invest what you can afford to lose. Thanks so much for listening in, everybody. Have a wicked awesome day.